and I am here today to bring you my October wrap-up. Now, October, like September, was a huge reading month for me. I actually read 21 books in October and started a 22nd one. So, I actually read about the same amount of books as last month. Last month I read 22. This month I read 21 and a third of another one. Last month's video was so long I had to divide it into two parts, so I'm going to try to do this relatively quickly so that I can get it into one video. Also, today I'm wearing my glasses because last night I had a migraine and it was awful and I'm not wearing contacts. Usually I wear my contacts so that there's no glare off my glasses with the video, but oh well, glasses today. Alright, so getting started at the beginning of the month, I started off with some of Tamora Pierce's Emily books. Now, Tamora Pierce is one of my favorite authors. She writes in two universes, the Emily universe and the Tortall universe. And so I read through her Emily books. She has two quartets, the Circle of Magic Quartet and the Circle Opens Quartet. Then she has another book called The Will of the Empress, then a book called Melting Stones, and a new book from this year called Battle Magic. Now, I read all of these except for the last two. So I read the Circle of Magic Quartet, which is Sandry's book, Triss's book, Daja's book, and Briar's book. This quartet follows four young mages in Emlyn, and Sandry is a thread mage, so she performs magic by manipulating thread in fabrics. Triss is a weather mage, so she can manipulate wind, earth, so she can cause deal with earthquakes and things, tides, rain, hail. She is super powerful. Briar is a plant mage, so he can manipulate plants, make them grow really fast, or talk to them, or whatever, and I love plant mages, so he's one of my favorite characters. And Daja is a metal mage, so she can manipulate metal, so she's a smith mage. She can do really cool magic with metal. Sandry is a noble. Triss is a merchant's daughter, Daja is a trader, and Briar is a street rat, or basically an ex-thief. So they all come from very different backgrounds, but they bind together and they become as close as siblings, or closer than siblings. So each of these books has all four of the characters in it, and they become really close, kind of like foster siblings. They all go to the same Winding Circle Temple where they study their different magics under different teachers, and they become really close. In the first book, they all come together and they have to deal with an earthquake. In the second book, the Winding Circle Temple is fighting off pirates. In the third book, they're dealing with a massive forest fire. And in the fourth book, they're dealing with an epidemic illness which is of magical origin, and they have to figure out what to do with it. Now, each of these books has all four of the characters in it, and you see it from all four characters' perspectives. However, each book is focusing slightly on one of the characters. So Sandry's book, Triss's book, Daja's book, and Briar's book have a focus for each of those four characters. Now, carrying on, after the Circle of Magic Quartet, Tamora Pierce has the Circle Opens Quartet. This focuses on the same characters, but whereas they are around 11 years old in the first quartet, now they are around 14 or 15 years old. The Circle Opens Quartet deals with when each of the four mages is leaving the Winding Circle and traveling and going on their own adventures, and they each have their own student, their first student in this quartet. The first book is Magic Steps. This book focuses on Sandry. Sandry moves in with her uncle, the Duke of Emlyn, and helps him take care of his household after he has a heart attack. She gets her first student in this book, a boy who performs magic by dancing, and there is a murder, and they have to figure out this murder, and it is of magical origin, and she helps her student learn to use his ability, and they both use their abilities to help catch the murderer. The second book is called Street Magic. This focuses on Briar. Briar and his teacher, Rosethorn, have traveled south, and they go to the country of Chamur. They are traveling to study different types of plant magics all over the place. And in Chamur, so Briar's background is as a street rat, but he's no longer a street rat. But in Chamur, there are a lot of different gangs, and there is a gang war going on. Meanwhile, Briar discovers a young mage who has stone magic, but she doesn't know that she's a mage. And so this book is very, very good. This might be one of my favorite books of both quartets. They get swept up in the different gang wars, and also Briar has to gain Evie's trust and start to teach her, because as a mage, if you have been awarded your mage certification from the Winding Circle Temple, which these 4 young mages have been, that means that you are obligated to teach a mage if you discover their mage abilities. So he has to teach Evie, but he has to get her to trust him first, because if you don't learn to control your mage abilities, they can get out of control. So he needs to teach her, and they get swept up into this gang war, and it's really, really good. My favorite of both quartets. The third book is Cold Fire. This focuses on Daja. Daja and her teacher, Frostpine, have traveled to the north, and this is a cold, snowy place. You can see she's ice skating, and this is a great book. In this book, they are staying in this town, and there are a series of fires. There are firefighting brigades in this town that deal with the fires, but Daja and Frostpine both are, in addition to being, they're smith mages, so in addition to manipulating metal, they can also manipulate fire. So Daja has to help with these fires, and it turns out that many of these fires are arsony, so she has to figure out who is setting these fires and stop it. And this is a great book. The last book in the Circle Opens quartet is called Shatterglass. This focuses on Triss. Triss and her teacher, Nico, are more kind of academic, and so Nico has traveled to this conference for a bunch of different mages, and Triss is there. And the place where this conference is kind of the capital of glassmaking. Like really, really great glassmaking goes on there, and Triss is really interested in the glassmaking. But when she is looking at the different glass shops and glass workshops, she discovers that there is this mage who manipulates kind of lightning and glass, and he is older. He is in his early 20s, where she's only 14, but she ends up having to teach him. Meanwhile, there is a serial killer in the town who is killing street performers and dancers, people who basically of the lower class, and leaving them in public places. And Triss and her student have to try to figure out who is the killer and stop him. This is also a great book. So, those were the Circle of Magic Quartet and the Circle Opens Quartet. Following this, Tamora Pierce has The Will of the Empress. This starts off when they are around... The first couple of pages of this covers a few years when they are all getting back to Emlyn after their travels. So it starts off with Sandry, and then each of the others arrive back. But the bulk of the book takes place when they are all around 18 years old. Sandry's cousin, the Empress of Namorn, has kind of blackmailed her into having to come to her lands, her inherited lands in Namorn. Otherwise, the country which she lives in and which she helps her uncle govern, which is Emlyn, which is the main place where the Winding Circle Temple is, will face consequences for that. So Sandry and her 3 foster siblings have to travel to Namorn to see the Empress, but the Empress has sinister plots to try to keep them there. And this book is really, really good. One thing I love about all of Tamora Pierce's books is that she has very feminist ideas in her books, and especially this one focuses on abuse and women's rights, and I love that focus in these books, and also how the main male characters are really feminist as well in these books, and I really enjoy that. So Tamora Pierce's Emmeline books are The Circle of Magic Quartet, The Circle Opens Quartet, The Will of the Empress. Then following this, she has 2 other Emmeline books so far, which I have not read, but I have. One is Melting Stones, which focuses on Briar's student Evie. The other is Battle Magic, which focuses on what happens with Briar and Rosethorn and Evie in between the Circle Opens Quartet and this book. I have not read either of those, but I'm planning on reading them next month. Then later she's going to be coming out with another book focusing on Triss. I also forgot to mention the Circle Opens Quartet was a reread, but the Circle of Magic Quartet was not, or something like that. I read them in the wrong order years ago when I read them, I suppose, when I read them from my high school library. But anyway, yes. Following those, I read a wonderful, wonderful young adult fantasy series by Cinda Williams Shima, the Seven Realms series, which is the first book, The Demon King, The Exiled Queen, The Grey Wolf Throne, and The Crimson Crown. So this is the Seven Realms series. These books follow Han Alistair, a reformed thief, and Raisa Anna Maria, the crown princess of the queendom. Han, one day, is with his friend Fire Dancer in the mountains, and 3 mages ride by and are setting fire to the sacred mountain. Han and Fire Dancer stop these mages from setting fire to the mountain, but in order to do so, they have to take from them an amulet. So now Han has this amulet, which turns out to be a very, very important amulet, which he has to keep away from these mages, and the story goes from there, with all of them hunting him down, and it starts a grand fantasy adventure with awesome magic, strong characters, a huge variety of wonderful settings, and I absolutely loved this series. It was so good. After those 4, I read The Assassin's Curse by Cassandra Rose Clark. This book follows Anana, who is a pirate princess, and Naji, an assassin. Anana has an arranged marriage which she does not want, so she escapes from this arranged marriage, and the spurned fiance's family sends an assassin after her to kill her. But she ends up saving his life, and therefore he is cursed to have to protect her life. And they have to go figure out how to get this curse removed from them throughout the book. This is a duology. There is a second book, and it kind of seems like one book that is kind of split in half. It reads that way. When you get to the end of this book, it seems like it's the middle of a book, and that's what happened to me. But I didn't have the second book with me, so I couldn't finish it this month. Now I have it from the library, which means that I can read it in November. But there is a second book to this as well, and I would read them both at the same time. After that, I read the first contemporary book that I have read in about 10 years, since middle school. The last contemporary book I read was, I think, in middle school, and I didn't like it. So I'm really, really not a huge contemporary person at all, but I wanted to give some a try. I had heard a lot about Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell, and so I read this, and this book was very cute. I enjoyed it a lot. It follows Kath, who is a new student at university. She is a huge member of the Simon Snow fandom, which in this book is like what the Harry Potter fandom would be in our world, and she writes fan fiction about the 2 main characters, and it just follows her experiences in her first year of college writing fan fiction. She is a twin, and her twin is really outgoing, but Kath is very shy and insecure. It also deals with her father, who is bipolar and has some mental issues, so she worries about him when she's in her first year of college. It's a coming-of-age story with her writing, and also her first relationship with Levi and her relationship with her roommate, and it's just a very fun, very cute book. After I read Fangirl, I picked up Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. I'd heard a lot about this book, and I really enjoyed it. This book follows Karu, who is an art student in Prague, and she was raised by basically what we would think of as monsters, or chimera. She basically has to run errands for them collecting teeth and other things, but she doesn't really know why. But she loves her family, and she's very secretive about all of that. She also has little things which allow her to get certain wishes, very minor wishes, and I just found that this was a very, very cool book. The world building was wonderful. I loved the world building, and the prose was just gorgeous, really beautiful, the writing. However, towards the end, the last third, there was a long flashback sort of thing that took place in the past, and I found that kind of bogged it down a little bit, and I wish that it had somehow been able to be interspersed more with the present, because it kind of lost momentum toward the end. However, I did like it, especially more towards the end of this book. This becomes very, not necessarily dark, but just very emotionally draining. Basically, one part of this book says, you know how Juliet fakes being dead, Romeo finds her and kills himself, and then she wakes up and sees that he is dead and kills herself. Well, this idea is, what if Juliet woke up, but Romeo had been so distraught over her death that he killed all of her family and just destroyed her whole world, and then she woke up. Like, that is basically what this deals with, so it's very emotionally draining. I finished this book, and I was just really, the second book is a huge war book with a lot of things going on with the redemptions of the characters, and so as soon as I finished this book, I tried to start the second book, but it was just like, I really needed a happier book for me in my life at this point, because I just needed some happy, feel-good book. Not a heart-wrenching book, but a heart-melting book. So I did not move on to the second book after this. I will hopefully be reading it this month coming up, but the second book after this I didn't read yet. So I really wanted a sort of really happy, fun, heart-melting sort of book after that book, which kind of was really, really emotionally draining. So I read another contemporary book, which was the second contemporary book that I have read in a super long time. And I'm not usually a contemporary person, but I loved this series so much. And I think that this video is pretty long, so I will be dividing it into two parts, part 1 and part 2, like I did last month, because I read so many books and I thought that I could do it quickly, but it turns out that it's still too long, so I will probably be dividing this into 2 parts.